Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you happen to find yourself. My name is Carmen Yetzi-Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We're so glad to have you as we kick off our Public and International Service Advisor Week of workshops. PISA itself is a network of advisors across the US who help and support each other to make it easier to champion public and international service on your campuses. So we're really glad that you could be here today, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the week as we touch on a number of different aspects under that umbrella. Hopefully you all received a copy of the program for this week. If you haven't yet received a copy, I'm going to ask my colleague Brianna to throw the link in the chat so that you will have access to the whole schedule for the week, as well as the biographies, the full biographies of all of our amazing speakers. We are so pleased in particular to be supported by the Robertson Foundation for Government, and you'll also find a link to their website where you can learn more about their wonderful work to inspire and support young people in pursuing careers in public and international service. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the program, there it is in the chat. In particular, I do want to flag for you the session on Friday when we will be talking more about APSIA, PISA, and how we can help you as advisors. And with that, I look forward to getting this week underway by turning the floor over to my colleague, Amy Kennedy, and all of our amazing speakers to share their careers with you. So thanks everyone for being here. And Amy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carmen. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm really excited to be a part of this workshop series. I took part in it in another lifetime before the pandemic. So I'm excited to be helping out with this version. And especially this conversation about careers in public and international service. We have 4 really great panelists with us today who represent a wide variety of experience across the field of international affairs. I hope this conversation provides you with some ideas and resources and insights that are useful to you as you work with students exploring their future opportunities. We're going to start off with me asking our panelists a few questions. So right now, I'm going to ask all of you to please turn on your camera and mute your microphone. As questions arise, please type them in the chat box, which I will be monitoring, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the conversation. So I'll start by introducing our speakers. First, we have Paulina Guzman, who is the Global Engagement Officer of the Mayor's Office of International Affairs at the City of Atlanta, where she advises, assists, and supports the city officials on matters of protocol and diplomatic procedure, and oversees the coordination of inbound delegations and international visitors to Atlanta. Paulina joined the City of Atlanta in 2017 as International Affairs Coordinator, overseeing the office's education portfolio and communications activities. Previously, she served as the membership manager for the World Affairs Council of Atlanta. Her duties there included expanding programming and promoting membership engagement, attracting corporate donors, managing programs, and overseeing the Young Professionals Division of the Council. Paulina holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science with a concentration in International Affairs and a minor in Economics from Georgia State University. She earned a Master's of Science in International Affairs at Georgia Tech. Although a native of Atlanta, Paulina has Cuban and Venezuelan descent and is fluent in Spanish. Stephanie Martone is a multilateral relations advisor in the State Department's Office of the U.S. Global AIDS Coordinator and Health Diplomacy, which coordinates the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. In this role, she supports the U.S. government's engagement within the United Nations system and other multilateral bodies such as the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria. Stephanie's career in public service has oscillated between development program implementation and headquarters level policymaking. She has worked with Mercy Corps in Tajikistan, implementing their USAID-funded maternal and child health programs, and with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services supporting global health diplomacy efforts. She also served as a community HIV/AIDS outreach project volunteer with the U.S. Peace Corps in South Africa. Before joining the Peace Corps, Stephanie was a civil servant with the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. Stephanie was a 2016-2017 Robertson Foundation for Government Fellow. She has a master's degree from the Fletcher School at Tufts University with concentrations in international development economics and gender analysis, and a bachelor's degree in international relations from American University. Jason Terry currently leads the exchange teams at Global Ties US, overseeing the development and implementation of virtual, face-to-face, and hybrid programs. Earlier at Global Ties, Jason led the events portfolio, transforming professional development and public engagement activities in support of making international exchange programs more effective. Previously, Jason was Special Assistant to the Executive Director at NAPSA, the Association of International Educators, where he produced plenary, VIP, and CEO level events for the NAPSA Annual Conference and International Education Week. He served as a founding board member of Young Professionals in International Education. Jason holds a master's degree in International Peace and Conflict Resolution from American University. He received his bachelor's degree in History and Political Science from Guilford College. Samantha, too, is an intelligence analyst at Everbridge based in London, where she identifies risks and produces threat intelligence to ensure physical security to organizations, governments, and people across the globe. Previously, she served as a program associate in the Asia and Pacific Division of the American Bar Association Rule of Law Initiative in Washington, D.C., where she implemented development programs to promote democracy and combat illicit trade. She has also worked with the U.S. Department of State in Laos and Human Trafficking Center in Denver. She earned her master's in international development at the University of Denver Joseph Corbell School of International Studies and a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Riverside with a focus on law and society. So as we begin, you can see that our panelists have a wide variety of experience. Some of them have had career changes or worked for different types of organizations. So I'd like to start off by asking each of you to highlight some key points in your career or moments of decision or transition that took you along the path that led you to change directions professionally or brought you to where you are today. Paulina, could we start with you?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Amy. First, I'd like to thank Carmen also for inviting myself and the Mayor's Office of International Affairs to participate in the session today. I hope I can provide any insights or value to you all. And thank you, Amy, for moderating. So first, I think I kind of wanted just to sort of start off in saying that, based in kind of where I am in my career right now, I feel like one would not, and if you had seen kind of where I started, you would not have considered me to be the model example of someone who pursues a career in international affairs. I think I'm definitely the epitome of someone who is on their own timeline. It took me 7 years to graduate for my undergraduate degree. I'm currently in the process of pursuing my Master's of International Affairs, and I'm on my 4th year now, hopefully graduating at the end of this year. But in both instances, I was working full-time or for pursuing an internship simultaneously. And when you kind of start to, you're going through this process and you start to see, your friends and your colleagues and your peers already graduating or finding, professional entry-level positions before you, it can definitely take a toll on your confidence and self-esteem. But I think there was sort of like some key moments where it sort of, led me to the trajectory that I am now. And I think it sort of all culminates into the fact that, you just kind of have to,
I think Steph or Paulina might have been frozen there. Are you back?
Yes, okay. I'm back. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's been thunderstorming all day. There was like a tornado warning earlier today, so I apologize. My connection might be a little bit unstable. So I'll go back to the original question. Yes,
you were just at the point of saying that the key moments were, and then you cut out.
Yes. So I think the key moment is when I convinced myself to apply to an internship position with the World Affairs Council of Atlanta. I started there. I worked in that internship for about a year. That led me to have the opportunity to pursue a position, a temp position at the same organization, which then eventually led me to take on a full-time role as a membership manager for the World Affairs Council. And then through that experience, I was there for about 2.5 years before, sort of within my network, I kind of found out that there was an opportunity open at the City of Atlanta Mayor's office, pursued that, and then within the span of 4 years or so have now come into my role now. So I guess sort of the point of what I'm saying, I think one of the significant moments that really changed the trajectory for me is just really kind of going for it, not putting barriers on myself, preliminarily before I actually had the opportunity to pursue something that I was interested in.
Wonderful. Thanks, Paulina. Stephanie, can we ask you to kind of take us through that path for you next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for joining. I think the biggest inflection point probably for me was when I was a Peace Corps volunteer. So I always knew that I wanted to work in foreign policy, and throughout undergrad had kind of narrowed that focus into international development. And so when I finished college, Peace Corps is a very natural next step, as I think it is for a lot of people who want to work in international development. It gives you that kind of on the ground grassroots program implementation experience. But after a couple of years, working in this community in South Africa, I just started to realize how a lot of these programs that were defined and put in place didn't impact change in the community in the way that maybe the policy had intended. And so I think this is something that the industry of international development still struggles with. How do you create efficacious policies that are still adaptable and flexible to a country context, right? Like what we would expect to work in one country might not necessarily work in another. And even, on a micro level, what might work in one community might not work in another community within the same country. And so that kind of led me to pivot a little bit and focus more on foreign policy and more at the headquarters level, and start working in a space that brought together governments and civil society and communities to start developing those kinds of policies to remove those barriers that might impact change in a community.
Thank you, Stephanie. Jason.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks, Carmen. I think for me, as a student, the study abroad experiences I had were pivotal. And I was a first generation college student, so I was figuring everything out on my own. But as an undergrad, I was in the UK Parliament working for an MP, walking the halls of power, writing ambassadors and cabinet ministers and doing all that. But then, and as a grad student, I ended up doing a service learning experience on a refugee camp of 40,000 people. So I went from the halls of power to no hallways and no power. So that though shaped my career, and I really thought I was going to be going into more sort of security and peace building kind of space. But I supported myself in grad school through temp work and got placed at NAPSA right after I finished my master's, and found the world of international education and exchange that is quite robust and has been around since about 100 years, and really loved it. But I was an executive assistant, right? Like I'm not supposed to be doing anything fun, but was able to make that job what I wanted to through the help of a supportive boss, but also helping figure out where my passions were. And I found a real joy in program design and helping people do their jobs better and navigate their careers better, and learn something new. And so I took that to Global Ties, where I've been at for almost 9 years. We've more than doubled in size in the time I've been here. We've gone from 1 federal grant to about 10 of them, and of various sizes. And so at every step, I've been able to sort of build the job I wanted. I actually created the job I have now for myself, wrote the grant, got the grant, begged forgiveness for creating my own job, and went on. So I think, being willing to take risks and be creative within the position that you're in, and also identifying the skills along the way that you want to grow into. And if you can't develop those skills in your day-to-day work, find a volunteer role or something where you can dig into that a little bit more. That helps you. I think I'll pause there.
Thanks, Jason. That's really, really interesting to hear about what that path was like. Samantha, could you talk to us a little bit about your path and any key moments that you had so far?
Hi, I'm Samantha. Thanks so much for inviting me to the panel. And I want to start by saying that I have a very similar background to Jason. I'm also a first-generation student. My family were refugees that arrived to America during the Vietnam War. So I actually never met anyone that was in international affairs at all. I've never heard of it. But when I went to undergrad at the University of California, Riverside, I saw a sign that says, "Do you want to study abroad?" So I was curious. I never even heard of it. Went upstairs and figured out I could study anywhere I wanted to. There were some financial hurdles, but I knew that I had to do this. So I got scholarships, was able to fund my trip and study abroad experience in China. And that was really a turning point for me. That was the first time that I met students that wanted to be diplomats and wanted to be in different international affairs majors. And I realized that I could have a career in something like this too. I mean, I've always volunteered and loved to help people. So I think that was a big catalyst for me. So when I obtained my master's in international development at Joseph Corbell, I worked mostly in the nonprofit space, focused on human trafficking and refugee protection, mostly in the policy research area. And I also worked directly with survivors of human trafficking as well in Denver. When I moved to Washington, D.C., I had a great job working with the American Bar Association Rule of Law Initiative. And I worked on development projects across Asia on various areas to include supporting the justice sector in Malaysia to promote freedom of expression, or working with the justice sector in Sri Lanka to combat wildlife trafficking, and Pakistan to counter terrorism. So in this role, I actually had the opportunity to facilitate a cybercrime conference, which is the first time the organization did something around technology and cybersecurity. And this is when it clicked to me, when we brought thought leaders from the private sector, like Facebook, from governments, from nonprofits, talking about policy issues like election security, internet freedom, countering terrorism, and those kind of things that it never clicked to me that technology and cybersecurity and these international affairs related issues would merge. And so I explored what it would, if there was a role in international or intelligence, and I found the perfect role at Everbridge as an intelligence analyst, where I'm working now in London.
Thank you, Samantha, and to all of our panelists for that. I think you've really illustrated something I definitely talk about with my students, which is that career paths in international affairs are not exactly linear. They tend to weave and turn and circle back and cross sectors, from private sector to nonprofit to government, back and forth. And so I'm hoping that each of you could tell me a little bit if there are any sort of skills or expertise, and I'm not just talking about hard skills, soft skills would be great too, that have been really crucial and critical for you as you've moved through your career. Jason, could we start with you for that one?
Sure. The hard skills I think are easy as I've moved up in the world. You got to know how to manage a budget, manage people. And nobody bothers to teach you that ever. So find a way to learn it sooner rather than later if you can. Beyond that, in my field in particular, we value creativity a lot. I mean, we're creating educational experiences from 1 week on the ground in the United States to 8 or 12 weeks online. And you've got to just get into the design of that. And often we're covering subject matters that as an individual, we may not know very well. But we've got to be able to find the right experts, the right people to do that. So the creativity portion is key. I also think that everybody's going to say networking, and that's important, but sort of doing it strategically. Don't just talk to everybody you meet and hit them up for coffee later, but like, can that person help you in a way? And can you maybe do something for them? And then finally, I talk about this a lot when I do some presentations on personal branding, like market yourself and think of yourself when you're going out looking for jobs as a product. So make sure your cover letter is singing out why you are perfect for that role. Make sure your resume is action oriented and doesn't just repeat a job description, but shows what change you created in the role, even if it's entry-level role. I tell people, like, if you're a receptionist, I know you answer the phones. Okay, tell me like how you improved call handling or mail distribution, like, and put that on your resume.
Great, thanks, Jason. Stephanie, could you talk a little bit about some of the skills that held over from your experience in Peace Corps and how you were able to channel those, change those, draw on those as you moved into sort of the headquarters level policymaking world?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think there are a lot of transferable skills as you move kind of between sectors. I think probably the most important one that I've used is relationship building, right? And that's kind of what Jason was talking about networking, but it also incorporates things like your communication style, being able to write to your audience. That's something that is really important in my day-to-day when I'm, writing briefers or writing talking points or speeches, whether I'm talking to other people in the government or I'm talking to civil society, I may like tweak that message a little bit. Being able to communicate with the audience that you're working with. And in terms of relationship building, when you work in international development, a lot of it at the beginning is just building that relationship. It's building the trust and building the networks, but deeper than just a professional network, right? Like, you need to be ingrained in that community in a way where you can be trusted. And a lot of that is is through your communication styles. And so I think that's one aspect of it. I think the other skill that is really important for undergraduates as they start thinking about their career is being able to craft your narrative, right? So you might jump around from job to job or sector to sector, but what's the thread that is common between them? How did you get from point A to point B? If you're in a job interview or someone's looking at your resume, make it make sense for them, right? How did you get to where you are? So those are probably the top things that I would say.
Great, thanks. Let's go to Samantha next on that one. Samantha, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. I think, well, in my role, it's really important that people have the ability to analyze and effectively manage a high volume of information under pressure, and someone who stays up to date with world events, and someone who has strong writing and research skills. Some of the things that I use to, from my previous experiences and in grad school, is to learn and develop myself and communicate effectively. And I think this is important for any young professional. This includes, like Stephanie has said, knowing how to convey your message to different audiences, whether it's for networking, talking to a manager, your team for conflict resolution, And really, it's just such a critical skill that will be invaluable to continue to improve. And I want to add that it's important to be patient and persistent. I don't think a lot of people usually use that as a skill, but it's definitely a skill. I mean, for me personally, what I mean by that is when I got out of grad school, I wanted to make an impact and I wanted to do it now, and I wanted to do it tomorrow. But it's important to have that enthusiasm, but also to be patient in learning aspects of the job. You need to succeed in first to get there, and eventually you will. In the nonprofit sector, for example, it's largely funded by the government, and budgets often take center stage in how decisions are made. So even though you have all these great ideas, they can't be executed right away due to budget constraints. So it's really important to be patient, but also persistent by being creative and figuring out a way to make your ideas come to life. So this could involve getting the right context or speaking to the right people.
Thanks, Samantha. Paulina, I'm putting you in the tough position as fourth person for this question.
I know. Everything has been said already. No, I think I completely echo the rest of what the other panelists had to say. I think what I would add to that is, and this is sort of going back to what Jason was saying about kind of like some of the hard skills about learning how to manage budgets, manage people. And I think one of the key skills that has been helpful for me throughout my career is to find ways to be resourceful. I mean, I think, many times as a public servant, working in the public service industry and government, nonprofit, international affairs, we often work with very limited budgets. In our line of work at the World Affairs Council, we were a membership organization funded by membership dues, and as well as some academic funding as well. At the City of Atlanta, we also have a fairly minimal budget to pursue our goals. But I think, being resourceful also sort of means, being willing to think way outside the box in order to get the job done, whatever you have the capacity to do, and your team as well. And that also means, doing things beyond what your job description is laid out to do. In many instances, I've had to set up lunch tables and clean and lug around 30-pound retractable banners to an offsite event. Sometimes there will be grunt work involved in many of these positions. Second, I would definitely say adaptability. And I think this also ties in with this relationship building aspect. I think in many ways, the exciting nature of our work requires us to sort of manage multiple projects and interact with a variety of different groups of people from different regions and different countries across the world, locally, regionally. We're always working with different partners to be able to accomplish our goals and make an impact. And as a result, we run into situations where sometimes customs and traditions can vary greatly in ways that we're not used to. So I think, just kind of learning to adapt an intuition, kind of a sixth sense that will allow you to become more receptive and prepared for the unexpected. So again, you're able to communicate the message effectively and convey your goals in a consumable way. And then it also leads to building more fruitful relationships. And then I think lastly, I don't think this was specifically touched on, but I would say also just sort of continuing to develop your curiosity for your industry and for the field that you're in. I think oftentimes, in this sort of fast-paced, international relations field where there's so many things changing, so many new current events and headlines, every day. You know, it's common to kind of feel like you're on this hamster wheel, and sometimes we get bogged down in the logistics of things. But I think it's also very important to kind of take a step back, build your intellectual curiosity, slow down your pace in building relationships with not only the partners that you work with, but also your own team members, ask questions. And I think this will definitely strengthen your ability to make better decisions and to, of course, to just enhance your personal and professional connections.
Fantastic, thank you. So the folks who are on this call today work with undergraduate students. And so I'd like all of you to think back to your undergrad days and think about what are things that students could be doing now and that the people on this call can be encouraging students to do now to prepare them for the types of careers you have and to start to develop some of the skills that we just talked about. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if anyone wants to jump to go first, that would be great. Otherwise, I will pick.
Yeah, I can go for it. So I would recommend that advisors have information on groups to help students improve on their communication, public speaking, and leadership skills, such as Toastmasters International. I joined Toastmasters International in DC, still have a lot of work, and I just cannot recommend it enough. I have met with a lot of senior level professionals in the international relations space in different sectors. And one of the things that they've conveyed is when they see someone that has Toastmasters International or some kind of group that shows that they are invested in themselves, it has been a big star on their application, and they want, regardless of the experiences that they've had, they want to speak to that person to find out more. So I would recommend that because Toastmasters International has different paths where the members can take like leadership skills or to talk in big groups, public speaking, negotiating, and things like that. So having a list of that, there's always a local group around. I would highly recommend that.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Anyone else have something to add? I know, Jason, you spoke a little bit about the impact of study abroad. I don't know if that would be relevant for this particular question.
Certainly study abroad if you can, even if it's just a short-term program for a few weeks. But I talked to a lot of other first-generation students, and they're like, oh, I can't go into international affairs. It's too polished. It's too posh. Like I can't afford to go to Washington and do an internship or something like that. And you don't have to do that. Like you don't have to be ashamed of your retail experience, your customer service experience. Those are all skills you need to have and do. And so you can also do international affairs all over the United States. We have affiliates from Global Ties in 85 cities around the country. There are World Affairs Councils in hundreds of cities. Like there are ways to be somehow globally connected. I see my colleague and friend Leah Gates from my hometown here. We got international affairs doing Model UN in Tennessee. And I didn't know anything about the world, but we made flags. And so, there are ways to do that where you are, be engaged where you are, get to know the world where you are. Refugees are relocated all across the United States. And there's now a group called Welcoming America that's just set out to welcome refugees. So, there's all sorts of ways to do something globally minded wherever you're at, and regardless of your station.
I can actually add to what Jason had to say, because I completely agree with him. I think something that really, I guess, sets some people apart is I guess the way that I sort of think about it is like, they kind of stay within the orbit. They are just continuously involved and, aware of what's, of the world and where they are. And I agree with Jason. There are usually many different opportunities to expand your network and expand I guess expand your experience about what other opportunities are out there, either locally or elsewhere. And then I think on that note, you know, of course, to network, but also, you know, encourage students, you know, to sort of not think of networking as transactional, but more of just sort of a continuous cycle of relationship building. It's sort of constant. I mean, I continue to network, you know, on a day or weekly basis, you know, even now. And I think we're just kind of always doing that. It's really just ultimately building relationships with people within your network and within your community without sort of this transactional pressure. And something that helps with that is, you know, saying yes to experiences. Of course, you know, that can also be a double-edged sword. You know, you want to make sure that you don't overwhelm yourself with things. But I think just saying yes and being open-minded to, you know, go to that networking event or go to that career workshop, or, you know, like Samantha said, you know, sign up for that Toastmasters International class. You know, because even if you don't have any, you know, if you don't feel like you have the confidence or ability, just kind of putting yourself out there and getting involved in that, you know, international affairs orbit will start to build your notoriety, and it will allow you, I think, to maybe not achieve, but allow you to build your network a lot quicker than if you were to just sort of, you know, try to embark on it, you know, kind of, you know, in a cold call type of way. So I guess that's sort of where I was going.
Great, thanks. Stephanie, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I want to jump in and just wholeheartedly agree with what everyone has said so far. I actually love the representation of first-generation college students. I am as well. And, you know, I was never in a position to take an unpaid internship. It just wasn't in the cards, right? And especially coming from a school where it's competitive and everyone has an internship every semester and, you know, seems to have it all figured out. And it's a very different sector in foreign policy, in international relations, when you don't come from that kind of background. And so absolutely agree with, you know, getting exposure in whatever way that means. If you can't go abroad, you know, finding something domestically that ties into your interest. The one thing that I would add is language skills. If students can become proficient in a language, I find that looks very good on a resume, especially if they're interested in a particular part of the world. You know, having some language skills, and even if it's not a language that you end up using every day, right? Like I speak Farsi, Swati, Swahili. I don't use any of them ever. I go to Geneva, like I'm never using them. But it's more of a tell of the dedication, right? And the interest in a multicultural kind of environment. So I think I would just add that one point.
Fantastic. That's a really good addition to the conversation. At this point, I would really like to open the floor up to our participants for questions. So please feel free to throw some in the chat box. We don't have anything in the chat box right now, although we do have a couple of links for the organizations that you guys mentioned. The World Affairs Council, Welcoming America. I think there was a Toastmasters link in there as well. But if there are no questions in the chat box, I would also encourage our participants to just unmute yourself and ask a question. If not, I have a whole list of questions that we can talk about.
I have a question.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Leah. I am an advisor at Drexel University. And very few of my students are studying international affairs, although none of them. Based on your own experiences and the experiences you've observed among colleagues, what advice might you give to students who are coming to international affairs as kind of a secondary interest, maybe starting from a more kind of technical basis. A lot of our students are studying, for example, civil engineering, and end up getting interested in international development and peace engineering and that kind of thing towards the end of their academic careers. And so they haven't necessarily had a whole lot of time to spend their sort of academic learning focused on those things.
A great question. Who wants to take that one?
So I am happy to jump in here. I have found in my experience that there are really no or very, very few things that don't translate from a domestic sense to the international space. So someone who is interested in something like civil engineering, I'm sure there are companies that work overseas that they might be interested in. I think, and really that goes for any sector. I personally work on health. Domestic health is, just one side, and international global health is something very different, but of course they're related. When there's a shift in an interest like that, my first thought again is when they're looking for jobs about crafting that narrative, what made them interested in taking this to the international sphere versus doing something domestically? Was there an international experience they had, or is there a specific country they're interested in, or a specific social problem that they're trying to solve? And then I might ask, is there an opportunity for them to do some kind of volunteer experience to kind of explore that a little bit more? I talk to a lot of undergraduate students just through my own networks about, how to navigate these spaces. And I think it's always a little bit more challenging when they come to it at the end, but that also makes it like a really fresh perspective. And I have found that it's always very interesting to hear that side and what kind of made that shift in interest for them.
Thanks, Stephanie. We have a couple of questions in the chat box, some of which are related, so I'm going to lump some of them together. We have a couple of people asking about how students can look for their first job. How would you advise someone to look for jobs in a field they don't know about? How do you ask about what you don't know? And ideas for entry-level roles, and what resources you would recommend students use to seek for internships in those entry-level roles. And also that you've talked about the importance of internships and networking. Do you have other ideas about how they can get some of that exposure and where to find those initial opportunities?
I'm going to try to tackle some of that. I won't promise to reach all of it. I think Idealist is a good place to start for finding roles. Indeed, another one, Glassdoor. There's an international development focused site called DevX, which I find impossible to navigate, but others might be able to use it better than I do. But also I think as advisors, one thing you can do is maybe start identifying professional associations, and NAFSA being one in the international education space, APSIA being an association itself, but look at those, and there's an association for everything. Literally everything. Upstairs from us in our office building is like, the International Dairy Farmers Association. There's an association for everything. So start looking for those, and they often have their own job boards and their own conferences and their own local or regional chapters that people can connect to. And then I recognize that internships are hard. I could only do an internship really quite local to me, where I could work part-time and make money, or during a study abroad experience when it was already sort of covered with the cost of tuition. So understand that that's a barrier, but even work study experience in an office can be helpful. like interested in getting those basic office skills, that's fine. There's a lot more there that I'm going to pause.
I think I'll also add what helped me was signing up for LinkedIn. They offer a discount for students, and it's around $15 for a month. And I used that for a few months, and I thought that was a great investment. For those who may not be able to pay for LinkedIn Premium, Indeed is another good website as well. That's free.
And don't underestimate the free version of LinkedIn, right? If someone finds an organization that they're interested in and they just figure out on LinkedIn who works there, most of the time people are happy to talk to students. People love talking about themselves and about their careers. And it's always been honestly a real joy to talk to students and to help them navigate the space, especially if they don't live in DC and they aren't kind of entrenched the way that we are. And so that's, going back to the networking, looking at the professional organizations and LinkedIn, I think those are all really great tools just to get them started. It does require, some effort on the part of the student for sure, but it's definitely possible.
Just wanted to remind everyone, a lot of links to the organizations that are being mentioned are being put in the chat box so you can access those. A couple of you have talked about being first generation students, and there's a question in the chat saying one challenge I found with promoting study abroad or other international opportunities is familial buy-in, particularly for first generation students. How can we best help our students' families see the value of engaging outside of the classroom through experiences like study abroad?
Oof, it's true. I mean, yes, I am totally one of those students. I ended up studying abroad in Kenya. So, take study abroad and then take it out of Europe, safe Europe. And I think for me, it was a lot of convincing that this was part of a greater career path, that this was only something that was going to help me in the long run. And there's a financial burden to that. Luckily, my school, the financial burden wasn't any greater than a typical semester of tuition, or negligibly so, if I remember correctly. But I mean, I also had the same conversation when I joined the Peace Corps, because I had a civil service job at the State Department that I quit to join the Peace Corps and have no job security and not make any money to pay off my student loans. And those are really, really tough conversations to have. I'll be completely honest with you. It has been really hard sometimes not having the support of your family. But I think for me, it always just comes back to the fact that, if I hadn't joined the Peace Corps, I wouldn't have gotten that job at Health and Human Services, because they only sourced return Peace Corps volunteers. They only looked at RPCVs. And so, it's again about crafting that narrative and explaining the long-term benefit. I'm sure others have things to weigh in on that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Stephanie, with studying abroad, as I mentioned, studying abroad in China, it was the first country I've ever been to. I didn't know if I could afford it. My mom told me not to go. She didn't want me to go. She said it's dangerous. It was all these things. And it was hard because I had to figure out a way to pay for it on my own. So I had the support of the financial aid office and the study abroad office to find those scholarships for me. So it took a lot of my effort and a lot of time to put in those applications, but there are people to help. And so I think if it can be funded in some way, I think that will really help. But also, as Stephanie mentioned, just to focus on the long-term objective for that, where whether you're studying international relations or economics or business administration or health, security, anything, when you take a global approach to that in international affairs, you can do anything. The job opportunities are limitless. So.
Thank you. We have a question about the transition from undergraduate study to graduate degrees from a faculty member at Idaho State University. So they have the hardest time to convince students, A, to work between undergrad and a grad degree, and B, to leave Idaho State University for their grad studies. Many of them have never left the region. How can I convince them to not run to grad school, and if they do, to go to DC or somewhere else where they can actually network and find jobs? Any thoughts on that from those of you who have done the transition to graduate school?
I will speak as someone who made the financial, though not academic, mistake of going straight from undergrad to grad school, because I knew I wasn't going to go if I didn't do it then, and that was, 15 years later, financial mistake, but academically worthwhile. But I think, really just, try there are short trips that study away experiences that some schools do in DC for a week or two, or New York or what have you. There are Model UN conferences that take place in DC and New York and other places. And you don't have to come to school here. I mean, the Corbell School is excellent and it's in Denver. And
but it's also extremely expensive. And my students could not afford it. And I graduated from Corbell with my PhD, so I get it.
Yeah, it is extremely expensive. I think a challenge is finding employers that offer support for master's programs. If there's a way that you can work and go part-time, that would be a big deal. My employer now offers that. Couldn't really help me out at this point, but or if there's a way to take a job at a university and then get a degree there as you work. I've seen most people do that, particularly in the study abroad space. It's pretty easy to work on campus and then go down the hall to the School of Education or whatever and work on your degree. So those are a few ideas, but the gap between undergrad and grad isn't necessarily essential, but certainly it can be helpful in discerning the path you want to go down.
Yeah, I think I can add to that as well. And I agree. And everyone is sort of on their own path, and everybody, needs to decide, what the best route is for them. But in my case, I was consistently working either during my undergrad, during my master's, or between both jobs, either at the World Affairs Council or the mayor's office that I had. So I've continually, in some capacity, been going to school and working at the same time. And although it is definitely a juggling act to be able to do all of that, there are, I think, some benefits to that, to sort of, to find some work experience between your undergrad and your grad experience. If graduate school is the route that students want to take, I think it helps one identify a little bit more your niche in the international affairs space, because international relations is so broad, and there's such a diversity to it. And there's different ways that you can go, whether it's public diplomacy, global health, humanitarian activities, refugee relations, international law, international business, trade, export, import. I mean, the list, goes on and on. And so I think, with the undergraduate education that you receive, you kind of get this sort of preliminary instruction on, on these sort of, different global issues, and just kind of, international relations theory, and just kind of these comprehensive overview of what international relations is. And I think taking on a professional role, an entry-level role in some capacity, will kind of allow you to kind of identify where your interests lie. And then when you do decide to pursue your master's, if that's the route that you want to take, it can only supplement your professional experience. And in addition to that, I would also say that, developing some work experience in between the two, kind of helps you develop these like soft professional skills that you may not, experience in a master's program at the same level that you would in the professional world, whether that's managing people or managing project managing a program, or how do we work through and fulfill different organizational goals and initiatives and expectations? How are they accomplished? How do we work with partners? How do we find funding for our projects? Like all these different things are soft skills that I think it's difficult to be translated unless you work in like some professional capacity. And of course, the master's program can only supplement your experience. And for me, it has. And I find a lot of different ways in which I can translate the education that I'm receiving in a master's and undergraduate education to my role at the mayor's office. So I think they can definitely work in tandem, but I have found in my own experience that it has been helpful.
All right, we are getting close to the end of our time, but I want to make sure that all of our panelists have the opportunity to share anything burning away that they want to make sure you take home with them or with you. So Jason, Stephanie, Paulina, Samantha, we have like 4 minutes, any final thoughts that you want to share with everyone about career paths, careers in international affairs, what undergrads can do now, how advisors can support them? It's just a small topic.
Yeah, just one last thing I want to add on the last question. If all else fails, I think Paulina and Jason gave some great tips there. If all else fails, I would recommend maybe inviting people who have been through it, who didn't go to grad school right away, and having some kind of panel like this, putting it online and having them ask questions. And it might change their mind to hear it coming from people who recently went through it. So that's what I would advise. Another thing is I want to thank all of you for your role as advisors. I think it makes such an impact, honestly, in every student's lives. And I know it made an impact for me in grad school. So I want to just say, stay strong. And thank you for joining us.
I'll say two things. One, I've never been anywhere abroad that my parents approved of. And two, as having been recently roped into being on an alumni board for my college, tap into the alumni networks. You have no idea what the alumni from your college may be doing. And so call the alumni office, sift through the database with them, and like there are people there, and create volunteer and mentoring opportunities that alumni can tap into to help your students.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, and something that we hadn't touched on earlier was alumni networks, which I've absolutely relied on and encourage other students from my institutions to reach out to me all the time. I really appreciate that the questions that are being asked are very cognizant of the fact that students are coming from different places, both personally and professionally. And I think that's something really important to keep in mind, especially, in this field that can often feel and be very privileged, very white, honestly, and taking those things into account. And, I think the options for supporting students to reach these kinds of career goals are there. They take a little bit of digging, as we've all mentioned. And, I think the support is also really critical, that students don't become so frustrated with not being able to access things that they decide to leave it.
Just to end, I completely agree with Stephanie. You know, I commend everyone that's in this session today in asking these questions and sort of meeting the students where they are, because everybody is living their own different experience and trying to make the best of their situation and also pursue their own professional goals simultaneously. So, you know, just, you know, helping them walk through and guide them through perhaps their confidence levels or, sort of being an ear for them, you know, to express their frustrations is very helpful. You know, that I wish I had actually taken more advantage of my career advisor resources at my school. It was sort of a challenge for me because I had already preemptively, you know, decided that I wasn't qualified, you know, to do this or that, or to embark on this internship or that. But if I had somebody sort of within my network that kind of pushed me towards it, I think I would have gotten there a lot sooner. So again, I think these are really refreshing questions to hear, and I hope we were able to provide some value. And just know that if you all have any specific questions about our office or what we're doing at the city, to feel free to reach out to me. I can share my contact information. And if there's any students that you are working with that are interested in what we're doing, feel free to connect me with them. I'm always very happy to meet with students on these subjects. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. What a wonderful conversation. We appreciate you sharing your time and your experience with us. I would like to remind all of our attendees that there's going to be a survey in Zoom. There will be a link in the chat box. Oh, there it is. Please fill that out. And I also want to remind you that you're all invited to the session tomorrow on comparing the landscape of professional graduate degrees. So especially for those of you with questions about the transition to graduate school, what different types of programs are out there, that will be a great session. So thank you everyone for your time, and especially thank you to our wonderful panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry, just doing the last bits of cleanup on data.